Our expert today, Mark Cantor, Cantor Injury Law. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Mike. Like you said, our law firm is Cantor Injury Law. I've practiced exclusively in the area of personal injury since 1993. I believe it's important to be active in our community. So my family gives back. I was the executive vice president of the Jewish Community Center for years and years. And I'm currently a professor at Harris Stowe State University, where I teach law, and I'm donating my earnings back to the school in the form of scholarships. You know, it is important to be part of St. Louis.
And our topic today is going to be truck collisions. We've probably all seen one or two on the side of the highway at any given time in our lives, and you're almost always horrified by some of the damage that can occur from these crashes. Then you start thinking about the people involved. Not only the victims of these crashes, also the truckers. We want to definitely stress from the get-go here that this is not an indictment of truck drivers, but unfortunately, sometimes operating these big machines can come with some very serious consequences if they're not maintained and if they're not operated properly. And in your career, you have unfortunately dealt with some cases where people were seriously injured in these truck accidents.
That's true. And I want to address your first point first, which is that most truckers are incredible drivers. They're highly trained, they're highly skilled. It's like the difference between being an athlete and being a professional athlete. Most truck drivers are incredible, and they have few accidents, few collisions. Truck drivers are driving over 93,512,000,000 miles a year. That's enough to go around the world 4 million times. The trucking industry is huge in the United States and represents 83.7% of industry revenue, as opposed to like trains and water or air. And you know, we have those cases too. But today we're focusing on the trucks, and so like you said, most truck drivers are great drivers. But when a truck hits a car, a truck weighs on average 16 times more than the average automobile. So an 18-wheeler weighs on average 80,000 pounds, 40 tons, whereas a car may weigh between 3,000 and 5,000 pounds. It takes 16 times the distance to stop, or 40% more, just because of its sheer weight. And so if a truck doesn't stop, if on the rare occasion that truck driver is not being as professional as they should, or they're being inattentive, or they've got some other life problem with drugs or alcohol, and a truck hits a car, it causes huge damages. And I think I have a photo of a recent case here. So this is an actual car that was driven by a client of mine, Jerry Moore, and as you can see, he was hit by an 18-wheeler, and the case was resolved immediately short of trial for $2.2 million. The name of the truck and the insurance company has, we've agreed to keep it confidential. But I think the point illustrates, the picture illustrates the type of impact. I mean, these are huge, huge vehicles. So yes, we've seen these at Cantor Injury Law, since 1993. That's what I've done, is trucking cases.
If there is someone who is unfortunately involved in one of these accidents, first, their health is going to be a top priority, receiving the medical care that they may need to hopefully recover from these injuries. But with all of that going on, it is important early on in the process to begin making sure, whether it be family, loved one, friends doing this for the injured person, to make sure that they are putting themselves in the proper place to protect themselves and to represent themselves when it possibly becomes a legal situation.
Right. Well, if there's a case, and this is for any case on the roadways, whether it's a truck or car or motorcycle, you should always get a police report. The police report is kept by an independent witness of the facts, the police officer that is recording those events contemporaneously with as they occurred, and they're recording statements, and those things are admissible at trial. So you want to make sure that you protect the scene. So, pull over. If you need emergent care, call 911, check on your passengers. we want to make sure that everyone survives and gets the best care that they possibly can. Then you call the police. You ought to be careful about what you say. Okay, you may not want to give a recorded statement unless you have counsel, because insurance companies are in the business of accepting premiums and not paying benefits, so they're going to try to trip you up. I would not give a statement to the insurance company without adequate legal representation. So no statements. Do get a police report. That police officer is going to come up to you and say, "How are you?" And you got to think about your answer, right? And we try cases all the time where the defense gets up and they say, look at the box the police officer checked, no visible injuries. And then in the narrative it says no reported injuries. You may be thinking, I'm lucky to survive this collision, okay? My thumb might be off, or but I survived. So you might say, I need medical help and I'm okay. And then later find out that you need a back surgery. So you got to think about what you say. Protect yourself, protect the scene, get videos, and then call a lawyer. I would suggest, obviously, that you call Cantor Injury Law, but just call a competent lawyer to make sure that your rights and your family's rights are protected.
When we discuss the idea of negligence, that becomes really a top focus as you look at these cases from a legal perspective and from a police perspective as well, as they determine what they're going to put in their report. Let's define negligence and then explain why it is so important to make that determination early on in the process and how it really kind of dictates things as we move forward with the case.
Well, that's a great question. And the term negligence in a trucking case is the failure to use that degree of care that a very careful driver would use under the same or similar circumstance. And I just taught this to my class at Harris Stowe State. I mean, we're talking about the different application of negligence. Negligence in a medical malpractice case is the failure to use that degree of care that a reasonably careful doctor would use. Okay, but for drivers, it's a very careful, it's the highest standard. So negligence is that failure. Okay, so we sometimes use, the words careless, and we use inappropriately the word accident, because it's not really an accident, it's a preventable collision. The term accident is a nice way to say someone messed up, okay? An accident to me is when a 2-year-old spills their milk. It's not when a truck driver driving a 80,000-pound vehicle that's not slept for 16 hours and is violating other laws runs into your back of your van. Mm-hmm. That's not an accident, that's negligent. That's the failure to use the highest degree of care. That degree of care that a careful person uses, a very careful person uses, under the same or similar circumstance. So, texting, drinking alcohol, not paying attention, falling asleep, all those are classic examples of negligence, and we see those routinely. But there's other negligence. They could negligently maintain that vehicle. We've had cases where the trucker says, I hit the brake and they didn't work. We've had other cases where, the load is loaded improperly. So you're carrying 80,000 pounds and 60,000 pounds is on the right side, and now you're getting on or off a highway and that trailer flips and you crush another vehicle. So that may not be the driver's fault. Yeah. That may be the company's fault. They loaded it properly, or they maintained the vehicle improperly. Or there's lots of, chalk the tires, which is when you put that wedge under the tires. There's different rules that apply, and there's so many rules that we regulate them federally. So we have a federal motor carrier safety regulations, and we've said this is such an important thing to the United States of America that we're not going to just leave it in the state courts. We're going to apply some federal laws that apply to all truckers, regardless of whether you're in Missouri or Illinois. And that's important. So we've said if you're going interstate between states, you have to have at least $750,000 of insurance. That's important because if they are negligent, in Missouri, the minimum is $25,000 for a car. Well, that's a huge difference. And we're saying if they're carrying toxic, it's $5 million. And so what most people don't know is, there might be $750,000 worth of insurance, And that's true, and they'll answer in interrogatories, there's $750,000. Well, what additional insurance is there? And there might be $10 or $20 million.
Wow.
So, we've regulated this industry on a state level and on a federal level, and we know that that truck has $750,000 of insurance if it's going between two states at a minimum.
Wow.
To protect against that negligence.
That kind of falls in line with obligations from the trucker standpoint, and then also that concept of the state and federal rules that regulate this industry as a whole. There are some things that, in just preparing to have this conversation with you today, that really struck me, and they're things that can often come out in these cases as you're kind of building up your discovery and evidence. And one of those things that absolutely floored me, that I had no idea about, was the fact that there is a black box data recorder, if you're not familiar with that term, most frequently heard about in plane crashes, airline crashes. They talk about recovering the black box so you can hear the communication between the pilot and the tower, or whatever the case may be. There is very similar technology and some other technology as well in these trucks that oftentimes can, I would imagine, make or break cases for defendants.
So that black box is called an EDR, electronic data recorder, and every truck has one. It's required by law. So these 18-wheelers have them, and after a collision, we can go and we can send our engineers and our accident reconstructionists out, and we do. And we spend thousands and thousands of hours to pursue these cases properly by getting on them right away. I mean, that data is held for at least 30 days. We want to preserve the truck, and we want to go get that electronic data recording. We also want to get the dash cams. I mean, all these trucks have dash cameras,
wow.
Okay? And so, we see videos of these collisions. It's unbelievable, the type of damage. But, that drivers are also required to keep electronic logs of their time. So there's an app. And we all remember the case of Tracy Morgan, the Saturday Night Live comedian. He was in a limo in 2014, and the limo was hit by an 18-wheeler Walmart truck, and it killed a friend of Tracy's in the car, in the limo, and Mr. Morgan was severely injured. Well, it turns out that the driver of that Walmart vehicle had been awake for 28 hours after driving more than 800 miles from Georgia to Delaware. And then the accident occurred on the New Jersey Turnpike. And we all recall that Mr. Morgan was in a coma for 2 weeks after the accident, and his friend died. So that data, we keep these logs, and we can compare it to what the truck says, okay, what the electronic data of that truck says. And the truck records hard stops and accelerations, and the video records what actually occurred. And so it's very important to get a lawyer so that letter is not spoiled. Spoliation means, some people purposely get rid of evidence. I would never accuse an insurance company or a trucking company of doing that, but, it does happen. And so you need to make sure that you preserve that evidence and you get it right away. You want to get that black box data and protect your loved ones and your family so that no one skirts their responsibility.
You also talk about some of the different insurance requirements for trucks. You touched on that a bit. Is there some more you'd like to go into as it relates to that?
Unfortunately, if a truck has $750,000 of insurance and you're terribly injured, you may also be able to get money from your own insurance for what's called underinsured motorist coverage. And you may also be able to secure medical payments benefits from your own insurance company. And that's not just in trucking cases. That's in every case in Missouri and in Illinois. People ask me insurance questions all the time, Mike, and I talk to them about trucking cases. But in a car accident case, if someone hits you and runs away, you say, well, they got away. Well, you have $25,000 of what's called uninsured motorist coverage on your own insurance policy. So today we're talking about truck collision cases, but insurance applies in every single case, including boating cases. I mean, we handle the whole spectrum. But as far as trucks, the biggest thing is to discover whether there's any excess or umbrella coverage, because normally there is. So, when they come at you and they say, well, we've got a $750,000 policy, we're going to offer you that. And if you don't have a lawyer, you may never find out about the $10 million that they didn't tell you about.
And also this idea, and while we said right off the top, not here to indict truck drivers or the truck driving industry, but unfortunately we do see cases, you see cases, and we report on cases sometimes where there are issues with the driver. I mean, just run me through some of what you've seen where the driver was negligent for whatever reason.
All right, well, unfortunately, it's not just the driver. I mean, we have cases where people have been decapitated by running into the back of trucks. And the law is that you have to have a safety guard there. And that's been the law for some time now. But if it's not there, it's reasonably foreseeable that a car may make a mistake and run into the back of a truck. Well, that shouldn't be a death sentence, okay? That's why you have that safety railing system on the back of trucks. I think it was since 1998. Yeah, I think after January 26, 1998, all trucks over 10,000 pounds must have a rear impact guard. And so that, that's something that you say, well, a person shouldn't run into the back of the truck. Well, they shouldn't, but if they do, that guard needs to be there. We've seen other cases, there's strict requirements about when you can drive. So this applies generally to everyone. There's an 11-hour rule. You can only drive 11 out of 14 hours. And then you have to take 10 hours off. And so some small companies might be forging their logs. Okay, you got to take 30 minutes off every 8 hours. And there's some people or some companies that have the bare minimum insurance, and they don't hire the most trained professional drivers, and then they have a collision. And so then we're digging through their electronic data recordings and their electronic driving logs, and unfortunately, sometimes there's non-compliance, and that's what caused. I mean, look, you don't want to have like in the Tracy Morgan case where someone's driving for 28 hours.
Yeah.
So we've seen line of sight cases where the truck driver, squeezes someone out. You can see it on the video, but they're looking and they
just don't see
that
it.
car, and they pull over and they're smashing that person against the guardrail. I've seen cases where plows hit cars. So we've seen a lot of rearing collision cases. We've seen cases where the truck's going 70 and the van's going 50. So it's not a stopped car, but if a truck hits you and it weighs 80,000 pounds, you're going off the road and you're flipping, and it's going to be a problem.
It's going to do whatever it really wants to do, or whatever physics says it's going to do to your vehicle. You're not going to be able to compete.
Right. We've seen paralysis cases and rollover cases, and I've represented truckers in cases where the load was loaded improperly and it caused the truck to flip. I mean, there's only so much you can do as a trucker, right? So if your marching orders are, take this load from here to there, and we've loaded it for you. Well, if you get in that and it's not buckled down properly, so the load shifts, or it's not weighted properly, that may not be the truck driver's fault. And there's a concept in the law called respondeat superior. It's where you can sue someone else, someone that's responsible. So we've seen negligent hiring. So you hire a person that got a bad driving record and they're addicted to drugs, and you put them behind a truck, and of course something bad happens, and you sue them, and they don't have any money. But the company that hired them might be an extremely wealthy company. Well, is it fair to have a paralyzed client and a bum that was driving the truck and not get a recovery? That makes them a burden on the whole society. So then you say, well, wait, they didn't interview this person properly. They didn't check his driving record and see that he was suspended 4 times, and that all the other issues in his life. He's got drug charges. So now you go after the company under respondeat superior, vicarious liability, and negligent hiring and supervision. So you say they didn't do their job right. They shouldn't have hired him. They shouldn't have let him drive. His bad driving is your responsibility, and you pay up, Mr. Big Company.
Yeah. We're having a discussion today with Mark Cantor from Cantor Injury Law. The topic of discussion today is truck driving and accidents, or as we learned, the better usage of the word is really crashes that occur
Preventable collision.
Preventable collision. Before we wrap things up today, is there anything else that you would add, or just a word for anyone listening as it relates to a situation that they or a loved one may find themselves in?
Yes, roadway safety is all of our responsibility. So we need to use that highest degree of care. And I'm teaching a 15-year-old to drive now, and it's the basics, right? It's put your phone down, don't be distracted. 10 and 2. Okay, we're not doing our hair, we're not eating, we're not talking on the phone. Put these phones down. These phones are a killer. I mean, we get data from the black box, but we also always get the telephone records. I want to see whether they're texting or they're calling. So put your phones down. It may not be the truck driver's fault. I mean, cars cut trucks off too, and we get those on the dash cameras. Okay, but so many of our cases now at Cantor Injury Law involve a phone. If everyone would just put the phone down, we'd be much better off. And don't be distracted. And if someone else causes you harm, protect yourself, protect the accident scene, get the information, and call us, 314-628-9999. I mean, we only want the cases if they're real and they're true, and we do the system disservice to pursue a invalid case. So if you have a real case and a real injury, we're here to help. And if you don't waste our time. I mean, I think that's the point of this, is we want everyone to be safe. And if someone's not safe, then our law firm will help you.
Thank you for your time, Mark.
I appreciate it.
It was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I know those listening and watching have learned a lot as well. You've shared the information about where people can find out more, and really kind of a special thing. This is our first episode of Ask the Experts, and you are absolutely an expert in your field. Thank you again for your time.
Thanks for having me.